Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God I'm breathing. And I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one day, one day. It's not about win or lose, 'cause we all lose when they feed on the souls of the innocent. Blood-drenched pavement, keep on moving though the waters stay raging. In this maze you can lose your way, your way. It might drive you crazy, but don't let it face you, no way, no way. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one day, one day.
One day this all will change, treat people the same. Stop with the violence, down with the hate.
One day we'll all be free and proud to be under the same sun, singing songs of freedom like
Why-yo, why-yo, yo, yo. Why-yo, why-yo, yo, yo.
all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one
All right, hey everybody. It is Wednesday evening, May the 11th, 2022, and hope you've had a great day. I want to say hello to my mom. Hey Mama, I love you. Hello to Jerry and Janet, and to the Eddies, to Mike and Lauren and David and Levi and Valor and Haven and Everett, and good evening. Did I say good morning? I meant to say good evening. Habit, you know. Good evening to Jessica. Good evening to Dayspring, and to Ron and Amy, and to Sonia and Margarita and Sonia Takach, and to Carol, and Buenos tardes to Elva, and Shalom to Steve, and let's see, and good evening to Pastor and Sister Martinez. Hope you're doing well. And hello to Patty Hambright. Hope you're doing well as well. And there, hey Rachel, how you doing? Good evening. I think you're probably 2 or 3 hours ahead of us, so good evening. Hope you've had a great day. Well, listen, yesterday's passage, you know, we covered quite a few verses, but it was a really short daily manna, and I need to get going on today's, because today we only cover a few verses, but there's a lot in these verses, and the title of today's daily manna is the branch sprouts true beauty. And the branch sprouts forth to true beauty. And so when we back up to Isaiah chapter 1, where the Lord has called his people, there's the great arraignment, right? He's calling his people to lay out the charges, and he calls the heavens and the earth to stand as witnesses. And he addresses the charges. He addresses the emptiness and the futility of their acts of worship, and it's become disgusting to him. He's like, this is not what I want. I don't want this outward posture of worship that's devoid of what I'm actually trying to produce in you. You know, I've made this analogy before, but it'd be like, it's like if your spouse was, you were being unfaithful to your spouse, just repeatedly unfaithful, and your spouse knew that and wanted your faithfulness, and you just kept bringing roses and saying, hey, let's go on romantic dates, and it's like, ugh, I don't want that. I want that with what is righteous, and with your faithfulness and with your heart and with your love. But apart from that, your roses and your gifts to me are actually revolting to me. And that's really what the Lord is expressing in Isaiah chapter 1. And near the end of the chapter, though, I mean, the Lord invites his people to restoration. He says, come now, let us reason together. Though your sin is as scarlet, it'll be as white as snow if you'll just listen to what I'm saying. If not, it's going to be painful for you. So near the end of chapter 1 in verse 25, he says, I'm going to handle this. And he says, then I will turn my hand against you or on you. And he's saying, I'm intent on doing this. I'm going to turn my hand on you. And so that's a phrase that always describes a hostile action. But it's hostility toward what is defiling his people. It's a hostility toward what is destroying his people. He is intent on turning his hand upon his people to purify them, to restore them. He continues in verse 26, I will restore your judges as at first, your counselors as at the start. Afterward you will be called city of righteousness, faithful city. Zion will be redeemed with justice, her repentant with righteousness. Verse 28 says, though, but there will be a crushing of transgressors and sinners together. Forsaking Adonai, they will be consumed. So he said there's going to be a restoration, right? You'll be this city of righteousness, city of the faithful. But there's going to be a crushing of what has defiled and polluted and devoured God's people, what's been in opposition to the Lord's purposes. And so then chapter 2 opened by pointing toward this restoration with this soaring language. It leaps ahead. It gives us where we kind of glimpse at the last chapter. It gives us a glimpse of this city of righteousness, the faithful city, the restored Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 2 verse 2 says, it will come to pass in the last days, in the culmination of days, in the outcome of days, that the mountain of Adonai's house will stand firm as the head of the mountains and will be exalted above the hills, so all nations will flow to it. Then many peoples will go and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Adonai, to the house of the God of Jacob. Then he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For Torah, his instruction will go forth from Zion, and the word of Adonai from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and decide for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning knives. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, nor will they learn war anymore. Come, house of Jacob, let us walk in the light of Adonai. Right? So after giving us now this glimpse of what will be, this ideal of the city of righteousness, city of the faithful city, of what will be, starting in verse 6 of chapter 2, we begin looking at the present situation among God's people, right? Like there's a reliance upon anyone and anything except the Lord. And so the crushing that is required, that he said there's a crushing that has to happen, there's a purification, there's the removal of the dross and the alloys, is then depicted in chapter 3. He says everything you've depended upon, the totality of it, every supply, every support, everything that men and women alike have depended upon, it's going to be stripped away. That your rejection of God's ways, of his overtures, is going to result in total loss. That you've traded away beauty for repulsion. Everything beautiful is gone. Everything you've depended upon, everything you've trusted upon, gone. Your reputation, your leaders, your wealth, your beauty, all supply, all support, gone. Everything's gone. It's basically a depiction of that famous quote. It's a famous quote I'm sure you've heard that says, Sin will take you further than you want to go. It'll keep you longer than you want to stay. And it will cost you more than you want to pay. The ironic thing, but I think it's fitting to note, what's ironic and what's heartbreaking and what's instructive about, even when you read that quote, sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, cost you more than you want to pay, is that's a quote that's attributed to the late Ravi Zacharias, right? Who was a great apologist. He was a world famous apologist. And an investigation found after his death that for a decade he had been, it's in Christianity Today, his ministry, I'm not defaming anyone, his ministry has verified the investigation that for a decade he was abusing massage therapists in the United States and across the world, and keeping his family members and the folks in his ministry blind to what was going on. It said he used his need for massage and frequent overseas travel to hide his abusive behavior, luring victims by building trust through spiritual conversations and offering funds straight from his ministry. A 12-page report released by his ministry confirmed abuse by Zacharias at the day spas he owned in Atlanta, uncovered additional victims in the United States as well as victims of abuse in Thailand, India, and Malaysia. It's just this sickening, shocking thing, and yet it's this picture of we can live a whole life and starting off where we were supposed to be, but fade into something we never thought we would become, and yet fooling the world with different projections about our righteousness, about our sacrifices, about basically what the Lord is talking about in Isaiah 1. You're bringing all these things to me, but you're being unfaithful, and I see it. But when we're doing all these things and everybody thinks we're great, we can fool everyone about our sacrifices, about all that we do for the sake of the Lord. But when we're taking advantage of the weak, of the broken, when in taking advantage of these girls who had been trafficked and worked in these places around the world, and we begin to think that the praise of man is enough. If everybody else thinks that I'm righteous, you guys think I'm good, you guys think I'm good, you guys think I'm good, it doesn't matter. The praise of man and of what basically believing what we've projected isn't enough. What matters will be what the Lord sees. What matters is that we will stand before Him, that all of it will be stripped away and what's actually there. Everything you've depended upon, all your righteousness that you've projected out there, all of it will be stripped away, and what's really going on is going to be in that day. He said in Isaiah 2:17, in that day the pride of man will be humbled, the arrogance of men abased, for Adonai alone will be exalted in that day. And I don't mention Ravi Zacharias to shame, to jump on him. There are many people that have been, I believe, started with a pure heart and a love for God, but then within that fame and everything coming to them, they've lost sight. It's so easy. And we're all capable of going down directions we would never imagine if we take our eyes off the Lord. If it becomes simply about going through rituals. If it becomes not about saying, Lord, keep transforming me. Keep making me into your likeness. If it just becomes about what everybody sees, going through the motions, the rituals, the Lord sees all right through it. Who are we trying to fool? You can spend a lifetime fooling man, but in the end of the day, your pride, everything we've depended upon is going to be humbled. The Lord says, in that day, the pride of man will be humbled, the arrogance of man abased. For Adonai alone will be exalted in that day. But then he goes on in chapter 3 to say, I want you to remind those who are walking in righteousness, I see you. I see you. He says, say to the righteous, he will be well, eating the fruit of their deeds. And then in verse 11, oi to the wicked, it will be bad for him. For the dealing of his hands will be done to him. Yeah, he's He says, I'm going to turn my hand against my people. There will be a purifying, a liquefying, there will be a crushing, there will be against his own people. But he's purifying his people. Does that mean abject misery? Does that mean they're going to go into exile? They don't know when, but it's going to happen. He's giving them another opportunity under Isaiah's ministry. Does that mean, though, that when you read chapters 2 and 3 and 4, that God has given up on Israel, that he has rejected his people and his purposes, what he desires to bring about through them? Absolutely not, right? He's actually turning his hand against them, but it will be for good, to liquefy and remove the impurities. And with everything stripped away, the dish wiped clean, it's at that point in our lowest moment that he will bring to pass what he truly desires. And so we'll see in today's passage, right, that the fires of exile which are to come will serve to actually form his people into more of what he's always wanted them to be. Rereading the last verse we looked at yesterday, says 7 women will grab hold of one man in that day. Bayom hahu, it says, in that day. And hold on to that phrase, because that phrase is about to be repeated. In that day, it's going to be bad. The 7 women will try to seize one man. But they're saying, we'll eat our own bread, we'll wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach. Right? So take away our scorn, the insult. But we're not asking you to do anything for us. Just make us look good. In that day, everything stripped away. We just need, take away our reproach. We just need your name to be over us. But in that day, it says, verse 2, Bayom hahu yiyeh. In that day, it will be the branch of Adonai. Now, this phrase, the branch of Adonai, tzamach Adonai, the sprout, the springing up of Adonai. That word branch, it means a sprout, a springing up. Everything we're about to read, beginning here in verse 2 through verse 6, every day, everything that's coming is because of the tzamach Adonai, the branch, the sprout of the Lord. Now, everywhere else in the scriptures that you read this phrase, tzamach Adonai, the branch or the sprout of the Lord, it's pointing to Messiah. It's pointing to his kingly and his priestly function. This is the only place we see it in Isaiah with that language. But after Isaiah, but prior to exile, Jeremiah spoke of the king that was coming. We studied this when we went through Jeremiah a couple years ago now. Jeremiah 23 verses 5 and 6, behold, days are coming, days will come, declares Adonai, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, tzamach tzadik, a righteous branch, and he will reign as king wisely and execute justice and righteousness in the land. In his days Judah will be saved and Israel will dwell in safety. And this is his name by which he will be called, Adonai, our righteousness. In that day, he's coming. And he's going to do justice. He's going to be a king that the king was always supposed to be. And then again, in the middle, that was before the exile. And then in the middle of exile, Jeremiah reiterated almost the exact same phrase in Jeremiah 33. And then on the back end of exile, on the other side of exile in Zechariah, we went through Zechariah a while back, a year ago. And when we went through Zechariah, here in Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8, it says, listen well, Shema now, please hear. He speaks to the high priest, Joshua, high priest, both you and your companions, seated before you because they are men who are a sign. He says, for behold, ki hineni, for behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch, the tzamach, the sprout. And ki hineni again, for behold, the stone I have laid before Joshua is one with 7 facets or 7 eyes. On it I will engrave an inscription, declares Adonai, that I will remove the iniquity of this land in one day. Verse 10, in that day, declares Adonai Tzevaot, every man will invite his neighbor to sit under the vine and under the fig tree. So in there you see, even with the 7 stone, the one stone with the 7 facets pointing to or it says 7 eyes. The 7 eyes, the 7 facets speak of the fullness of the Holy Spirit. It's symbolic of he sees all. He understands all. He knows all. We read much later in Revelation chapter 5, one of the elders tells me, "Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is worthy to open the scrolls and its 7 seals." And we had seen earlier in Revelation where it talks about that he had the 7 eyes of the Spirit. It continues in verse, "And in the midst of the throne and the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, I saw a lamb standing as having been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits, or the 7-fold Spirit of God sent into all the earth." So again, here in Isaiah 4:2, it says, "In that day, the branch of Adonai will be beautiful and glorious." Or it can be, it says, and he will be toward beauty, toward glory, or he will beautify and glorify. Right? He will bring beauty, he will bring glory. And the fruit of the land, excellent and appealing for the Israel survivors. In that day, the sprout will sprout beauty. Right? He will sprout glory. He will beautify and glorify. And everything that flows again from here is from this, what's sprouting forth from Adonai, right? Israel is not the sprout, the branch, but rather everything that Israel has leaned on has been stripped away. In her shame, the Lord himself provides a sprout, the sprout of Adonai, the hope of Adonai. This is God's grace and his kindness, this branch. And then, so the real and lasting produce, the fruitfulness of Israel, is coming forth from the branch of Adonai. It's not the result of her own fruitfulness, her own power, right? It says here, back in chapter 3, verse 18, said God is going to strip away that uses the word tiferet, which is her appeal, and it speaks of the headdress, her beauty or her headdress that she created for herself. And here now it says he will provide his own branch. And the fruit of the land will be tiferet. Now there will be this beautiful, the fruit will be beautiful and appealing because it comes from him. It says the fruit of the land will be gaon, will be exalted and beautiful, and crowning for Israel's escapees, Israel's refugees, Israel's survivors. Well, how did they survive? What survivors are these? Who are these that have escaped calamity? The calamity that overwhelmed others. How did they get here to experience this beauty? We see in verse 3, it says, so it will come to pass that whoever is left in Zion, whoever are the remaining ones, the leftovers in Zion, and whoever remains in Jerusalem, whoever is the surplus, so 2 different words for kind of the remnant, the surplus, the leftovers in Jerusalem, will be called holy. Literally it says, holy it will be said to him, toward him. He will be spoken, he will be called holy. But there's this emphatic holy. Everyone who is recorded among the living in Jerusalem. Everyone who has been written as living in Jerusalem. Each one at that time will be declared holy. Right? So those who are left, those who are remaining, there are these that are left over. And there's something here, they're being declared, something has changed. The Lord says of them, holy. They kadosh, they are holy, shall be said to each. So a people who had become progressively more and more unlike God, less and less like God in his moral character, in his character, in that day it will be said of them, holy. He says, be holy for I am holy. The whole purpose of the judgment and then the redemption, right, is that the people should be like God. He's going to purge away all this stuff that may have looked on the surface like it was the thing he wanted to do, but underneath it was rotten. It was disgusting to him. He's going to purge that away, remove the dross. He's going to turn his hand toward us and remove the dross. And through that purging, through that fire, it will be said holy of them. And they're recorded among the living, recorded, so this idea of even the book of life, recorded among the living. Obviously, the survivors are called the living, so that describes that, but it points towards something else. In Exodus 32, verses 32 and 33, the Lord himself speaks of the book of life, and then again it's in Daniel and in other places in the Tanakh. But so they're going to be called holy. And Isaiah, like the other prophets, though, in the midst of this purification, this punishment, he sees hope. That this is the hope. That the fiery judgment would be a factor in their cleansing process. Right? That those who realized, many may not realize the reason of this judgment, but those who did, those who would realize it, would turn from their sins, would turn from the sins that had brought the judgment. And we see the Lord talks about that in Ezekiel 36 and Ezekiel 39. There's an actual change. There's a change in they're not who they were. They've been made holy. They're being and they're walking in holiness. Everyone who's written in the book of life. We see this idea in Malachi chapter 3. Verses 16 and 18 through 18, we see on the other side of exile. It says, "And those who revere or fear Adonai spoke with each other. And Adonai took notice, and he heard. And a scroll of remembrance," right? This scroll remembers, this writing of the remembrance, was written before him for those who revere or fear Adonai, even those who esteem his name. Verse 17, "So they shall be mine," says Adonai Tzevaot, "in the day that I make my own, in the day I make my own special possession. So I will spare them as one spares his son serving him. Then you will return and distinguish between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves God and one who does not serve him." Right? So in all of this, the Lord says it's spoken over them holy. Now, in saying, okay, well, we have to walk in holiness, it doesn't mean that our redemption, our salvation, that our holiness is the result of our initiative. But rather, we are rescued because we have responded to the Lord's initiative, because of what he has done. That in the purification, in all that he has done, that we have responded. Those who do not respond aren't saved. Again, back in verse 18, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they will be as white as snow." If only you would accede, if only you would submit yourselves and hear and respond. Verse 4, we continue here, Isaiah 4:4. It says, "After the Lord," and it uses the word, like I think in the TLV, it has Lord all caps here, as though it's the name of Adonai, Yod He Vav He, but that's not the language used in the Hebrew text. It says it is the word Adonai, which means Lord or Master. After the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. The opening word here is an im, right? It's an im. It means if, but it's not like it's a conditional particle, but it's used when an event is certain, but its timing is unknown, right? So here it says when the Lord has washed away the filth, and it uses the word, filth is a nice word. It's using the word for like excrement. They're covered in excrement. That's the condition they're in before. But when he has washed away the excrement from the daughters of Zion, and has purged, this word for purge is more of a rinsing, has rinsed, has purged, has cleansed the blood of Jerusalem, or the bloodshed of Jerusalem, from her midst, from her innermost being. It's a word that can refer to your mind and your innermost being. When the Lord has washed away, has washed the excrement off the daughters of Zion, and has rinsed the blood of Jerusalem, the bloodshed from within her, by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning, right? So this purging, this washing away is accomplished because of what the Lord is doing, of the sprout, the tzamach Adonai. It's a work, but here it's a work of the Spirit. The spirit of, here it says judgment, but he uses justice, of mishpat. A spirit of justice. And a spirit of burning or blazing or scorching. So the question, some scholars say, well, does this mean like the word ruach, spirit, can be speaking of a wind? Is this speaking of a wind, like a wind or a blast? So that it would be a blast of justice or a blast of burning. But Isaiah has a rich awareness of the Spirit of the Lord, specifically in messianic passages. We see in Isaiah 11, then a shoot will come forth out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch, it's a different word for branch there, netzer, a branch will bear fruit out of his roots. The ruach of Adonai will rest upon him, the ruach of wisdom and insight, the ruach of counsel and might, the ruach of knowledge and of the fear of Adonai. And he will delight in the fear of Adonai. He will not judge by what his eyes see, nor decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he will judge the poor. Right? He's not judging with partiality based on the appearance, but he's judging with righteousness. He will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the poor or the afflicted of the land. He will strike the land with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Also, the righteousness will be the belt around his loins, and faithfulness the belt around his waist. Right? So there is this, the Lord is going to have cleansed by his Spirit, by a spirit that is of his justice, that is true justice. A spirit of justice that the Lord never betrayed in his forgiveness of us, did not betray his own justice and his own righteousness, but took it upon himself, that we come to see. In a spirit of justice, and a spirit of scorching, of burning, that this fire that cleanses, there is a cleansing of the excrement, a rinsing of the blood guilt from her innermost being. Right? And then, verse 5, a new creation. It says, and he will create, Adonai. Adonai will bara. He will create. This bara is the opening word. It's the opening breshit, right, of Genesis 1:1, and when he creates. And the word for bara is to create, and it's create by a cutting and a dividing. That's why the word covenant is barit. It's a cutting. The words are related. But he will create over the whole area of Mount Zion, and over her convocations, over her assemblies, a cloud by day, and smoke and shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all glory will be a canopy. Right? So now there's this comforting in this very familiar language, right? He's going to create a cloud by day, a smoke by a fire by night. He's going to create a chuppah of glory over the entirety of the place, over the mountain that is Zion, right? Zion means signpost. It's a street sign. It's a flashing sign to point to the Lord. This is what God intends us to be, right? This mountain that is in chapter 2 says is exalted above every mountain, the ones to which the mountains stream, the nations stream, right? The Lord will create over it. And the word bara, create, it speaks of divine action. It is only done by divine action. There's a newness, there's a greatness that's being done here by God's action. And this chuppah, this canopy of glory, will be over Mount Zion and her assemblies, her gatherings. Back in verse 13 of chapter 1, the word gatherings, assemblies, convocations is used of kind of the disgusting emptiness of their previous gatherings. God said, I can't endure it. It makes me sick. But now their gatherings, he's covering. Right? This all springing forth from the sprout, the beautiful sprout of verse 2. In that day, a canopy, a chuppah is the word, chuppah. A cloud by day, smoke and radiance of flaming fire by night. First of all of that familiar language, right? It connects us with the continuity of how the Lord has always operated, what he's always been doing. And then we get off track, but he brings us back to what he's always been doing. And it reassures us. That the searing words of judgment in chapters 2 and 3 didn't somehow mean that God had abandoned his people. He's got that, there's this canopy, there's this intimacy with him. The intimacy of his presence in our midst. We are under his chuppah, under his canopy. Verse 6 then says, then there will be a sukkah for shade by day. Again, pointing us toward when he had delivered us. And in the desert, we dwelt in Sukkot, that he was in our midst. And our Sukkot faced his sukkah, his tent in our midst. It says there will be, this canopy will be a sukkah for shade by day from the heat, and for refuge and for shelter from storm and for rain. Under his sukkah, there's a shade in the heat of the day. Right? In the burning desolation of the desert heat, there's shade, there's refreshing, there's a coolness under his chuppah. And in the darkness and the coldness of night, there's a blazing fire for warmth and for light. That the coming of his tzamach Adonai, of the branch, the sprout of Adonai, is renewed beauty. There is restoration. City of righteousness, city of the faithful. Everyone, they'll say, holy, holy are you. In his presence, under a canopy of cloud and fire. The same fire that purged them is now their protector. Right? And neither the sunlight or the driving rain, two opposite things, whatever it is, nothing from one end of the spectrum to the other, from the bright burning sunlight to the driving rain, none of it can hurt God's people. Nothing can, because we are under his sukkah. That's what he's doing. And so right here, there's this amazing, I love the way the Lord gives us this word of hope. In the midst of his judgment, he's like, I've got to do this. There's going to be a crushing. But to those who will walk in righteousness, I've got good for you. Hold on. And he keeps reminding us in chapter 2 and now in chapter 4. And these words of hope to cling to, because his desire is that we would respond, that we would turn from our wicked ways and we would respond to him and not walk in just the futility of empty religion that is simply an expression to impress others, but it's empty of the reality. He wants us to truly be who he always made us to be. Amen? All right. Okay. Well, let me say good evening to anybody that I missed. Good evening to Elise, and good evening to Lori and to Pat and to Len and Joanne. And let's see here. And good evening to Lisa and to Kelly Kenfield and to Kelly and Melody Woods. And I think I said, and good afternoon to Joshua. And I think I said hello already to Carol, but I'll say hello again. And good evening to, but I think Laglers aren't the Laglers? The Eddies. You have two different ones on there? Okay, gotcha. And hello to Tanya. Hey, Tanya, good to have you with us. And glad you're with us. And let's see here. Anybody else? Did I say good evening to Pastor and Sister Martinez? I think I did. And to Barbara Callahan. All right. Well, I think that's everyone. If I missed anyone, my apologies. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.
Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God I'm breathing. And I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the souls of the innocent. Blood-drenched pavement, keep on moving though the water stay raging. In this maze you can lose your way, your way. It might drive you crazy, but don't let it phase you, no way, no way. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play one day, one day, one day.
One day this all will change. Treat people the same. Stop with the violence. Down with the hate.
One day we'll all be free and proud to be under the same sun, singing songs of freedom like
Why-yo? Why-yo, yo, yo? Why-yo? Why-yo, yo, yo?
all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more wars, and our children will play